Lead us not into temptation.
Welcome to The Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life.
So, let me try this new format. I will call it the Commute format. Usually when I commute, I just try to make sense of things. So this will be kind of a saying out loud what I'm thinking. And recently, for different experiences in different parts of my life, I've been thinking about the difference between leadership. Well, let's first talk about leadership by itself. So, once in a while you run into somebody who will tell you what a true leader is, and they say a true leader says thank you, and a bad leader gives you warnings or whatever. Sometimes they say a leader versus a boss, and I don't think that those make any sense. You're not describing a leader, you are describing a normal person with basic social skills versus a psychopath or a bully. Sometimes you might have somebody that your boss being a bully and a psychopath, but the contrast between the two is not what makes you a leader. And that kind of leads to the other comparison I wanted to make is, what is the difference between a leader and a manager? Because everybody talks about leadership skills and you how to be a leader, and companies they want you to be a leader, but in truth they really don't want you to be a leader. And let me explain why. What they want you in most cases is for you to be a manager. So how can you tell the difference between a leader and a manager? So a leader by definition would lead you, would be in front of you, taking you somewhere. There's this idea of moving towards something, a goal, an objective, based on principles, on values, a general direction. So to be a leader, you have to have, let's say, little structure. Why? Because a manager manages. So he's an administrator. He or she, I use a generic he and that all. But an administrator is not drawn towards an objective. It's constrained, right? It's limited by constraints and tries to find the best place within those constraints. So if you are given a goal, you are expected to lead. If you are given constraints, you are expected to manage. Even if they call it to lead, you're not expected to lead. You're not expected to take anybody anywhere. And what is the other difference? Well, the other difference is the freedom, the amount of freedom. If you think about it, constraints are just limitations to your freedom, right? And the tighter the constraints, well, the less freedom that you have. What do we call tight constraints? Well, we call it micromanagement. When you micromanage, or you're micromanaged when somebody just gives you very short-term, very specific, very clear constraints and immediate feedback. When you're a leader, you don't have those constraints. Or if you have, they're very flexible, and you have a lot of control over that. You're given a lot of freedom. Now, freedom has this duality. What is the other side of freedom, or the other manifestation, or the other incarnation of freedom, is trust. So the way you are delivered freedom is by giving you trust. So again, if you're expected to lead, you are giving a fair amount of trust. And you can use that trust and the freedom associated to move towards the objective. Right? And you'll be obviously evaluated by how successful you were. So it's not just freedom to do whatever you want. It's freedom for you to get to the objective, to the goal. Right? And again, like I was saying, probably the constraints have to do more with values, principles, that expected from you. But with that freedom and that trust, you actually get increased accountability. Because at some point, you need to renew your trust and extend further your freedom, and that's what keeps you leading. But if you're a failure constantly, you will be eroding your trust. Now, this is kind of the other part of the problem, how to tell management from leadership. It has to do with risk. So if you're given freedom, if you're expected to lead, well, you might make mistakes. You don't have your success guaranteed. And people who issue that freedom, they should be aware of that. So that's the other contradiction that we see, and it has to do with the different stages at which an organization is. And maybe we will talk about this later or in another episode. But a leader has to change things, right? Again, we're talking about going towards an objective. Going towards an objective means that you have to leave the place where you are. And there's this interesting mental effect during battles, that from the mental point of view, it's easier to defend, it's less stressful to defend a position than to take a position. Because when you're defending a position, you feel shelter, you feel, you're not abandoning the safety, you're trying to maintain that safety against an aggression. But when you're attacking, you have to leave that safety and expose yourself, and that's taking a risk, a bigger risk than defending, right? But obviously nobody wants wars with just defending. So this idea of offense, this idea of taking risks to make changes, we could say is the masculine side of the problem. While the sheltering, the defending, the optimizing within clear constraints that give you safety is the feminine side, right? We're naturally predisposed differently, mostly men and women, in not just humans but animals in general, so that kind of another, in this case, opposing duality. And it's very frustrating for a leader to be expected to be a manager. If the person is a true leader, he will feel bad when he is asked to manage. And the other way around, if you're predisposed to be a manager, you would feel terrible if you're expected to lead, to take risks, to abandon, to move forward towards something, some objective. You'd rather keep things like they are, right? And you optimize within those safe constraints. So that happens at several levels, right? So again, I want to emphasize a big problem when we confound both, right? And before we go to that other level, let's talk about hierarchies. Hierarchies, if you think about them, they are just constraints. When you implement a hierarchy, you're implementing constraints, right? And those constraints are provided, again, to get some safety. You say, well, we need an organization. True, but there are different ways to organize, right? And you can have a dynamic organization based on, the current goals, the current leaders, the current efforts, the current resources. And you can have strict formal hierarchies where you're rewarded for staying in your trench. That's basically it. Now, think about the stages in organization. I'm not just talking about companies. This applies to pretty much any type of organization. And even I would say that could be applied to the smallest of organizations, that is the family, right? It's in society. But you usually have an initial stage that it's all about taking risks. It's all about growth. It's all about getting to the next thing, right? To have objectives and work towards those, and taking risk and adapt and learn. So there's this leadership. In companies, those are usually the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurial stage of the company is characterized by just growing. Why growing? Not because growth itself, but because the people who are leading in the real sense, they want to create something. There's this need to create. And if you think about it, many entrepreneurs, they don't care about what their companies do. They care about creating something. And while they're creating, they're happy because they're moving, they're changing, and they see the effects in the real world of their efforts. Now, at some point, for different reasons, but I think it's a feedback loop, kind of a vicious cycle. The companies stop growing and start trying to optimize, right? Then is when you can see that change from leader to manager. If you think about it, they try to solve the lack of growth by changing hierarchies, by changing the organization. Surprisingly, it doesn't work, or if that works, it's very short term, because the problem is not that. The problem is that you don't want to take risks anymore. And that generally doesn't happen with the founders, with entrepreneurs. They usually leave the company and they're replaced by people, usually outsiders, who have a pro record of managing. And that's where things change. And that's where leaders are kind of discouraged, because everything that a leader would do would bring risk. And the whole idea of the company now is to manage, is to avoid risk. And they might keep talking about leadership, they might keep talking about how we're going to grow, and you might see that the growth starts to be a different type of growth, not by just having new ideas, new products, new goals. It's about acquiring other, obviously less successful companies and optimize them and manage them to extract the juice that they couldn't extract themselves. But if you're not planting new oranges, there's so much juice that you could extract from the ones that you already harvested. So I don't know, I think it's an interesting topic. As I said, I was seeing this in different domains in my life, and then I started looking back and realizing that that has been a lot of my struggles, not being able to understand the changes and not being able to adapt or to change. I try to be a leader. I try to come up with better ways to do things. And I believe that that's what is fun, right? That's what is exciting. I say, well, so let's set up a goal. Let's see how we can get there. And sometimes the goal is, doing the same thing, but faster, cheaper, in a different way, creating new concepts in the way. It's what I enjoy doing, right? And you could thrive when the conditions are right, especially in this entrepreneurial stage of the organization. But you will really, really struggle, right, when you're giving constraints and they still tell you that you should be a leader when you're not. Okay, so those are some thoughts. I don't know if this will work. Tell me if you find it interesting, if you find it distracting. It's I will be getting some microphones to test if not only for the car, but to see if when I record, it records better sound with a microphone than just the microphone on the phone. So let me know what you think, and if you like it or not, this kind of very unstructured think out loud. And well, see you in the next one. Bye.